Happy New Year to you. Welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you for joining us on this first day of 2015. Let's get right down to it. We're going to start politics on this program. 2016 presidential hopefuls and the rest, but let's get around the table and introduce our folks. Jeannie Zaino, of course, here. Very pleased to join us as always. Dominic Carter, Andrew Whitman, Ellis Halligan, the same guys who joined us yesterday as we took a look back. We now take a look ahead. And let's start on the political front, and I'll start with you. You said yesterday that you thought we saw a new president for the last 30, 60 days of 2015. Can he be that guy once the executive orders and now the new Congress comes in? Do you think you see a relevant Obama for this year and next, or do you think we're talking lame duck walking?
Well, you know, if this is a lame duck walk, I wish he'd been doing it for 6 years. You know, truly, it turns out, Rich, I know this isn't a surprise to you, but the president actually has some power if he will just exercise it. And boy, Cuba, immigration, the list goes on. But yeah, he can do a lot of stuff. Let them sue him if they don't like it, but he'll win most of the suits.
Let me play devil's advocate with you. There was one thing with doing it in the final month of 2015. Now he's going to have a new Congress on his hands. If they choose to, if he chooses to say, you know what, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, they can basically relitigate if they want the Affordable Care Act. They can get into immigration and make life difficult for him. They can hold him every appointment that he wants to put up. Is that a calculation that he says, I got nothing to lose, or does he care about the party? With next year
I do not discount Congress's power to mess things up. They've certainly proven that pretty well in the last 6 years. But you know what? When you're going to negotiate and fight in politics, you're in a much stronger position if you actually have a position. And I think he'll end up better off in the end.
I think the president can set the agenda and can add new things to the agenda. For example, Cuba came out of nowhere. Or if he wants to do with criminal sentencing reform. And you know, more disparate sentencing when it comes to minorities and drug-related crimes, something like that, that's politically, you know, not the healthiest for somebody who's facing another election. He can certainly bring that up. He can set the agenda, but he can't necessarily make the policy. Ellis mentioned Cuba, but Republicans are going to try to block the funding of an embassy in Havana and do whatever else they can to try to slow things down. They're going to try to reverse the president's actions on immigration. So it's a bully pulpit. And I'm going to be fascinated to see what Obama brings to that bully pulpit in 2015. It's just, I wouldn't expect him to be able to put that into ink and actually get stuff through Congress as easily as he can drive the agenda.
But Andrew, if he gets half of it, you know, it's half more than he would have gotten if he hadn't done that, isn't it?
Oh, and you know, for some people, they said we've been waiting for this, like Ellis said, for 6 years, Dominic. Admit it, right now, if there was a political obit for his first 6 years, it would be a complicated one at that. He had some signature accomplishments, obviously healthcare. He was the guy who got Osama bin Laden, but at the same end, all that promise, all that hope here, not yet materialized.
More hope. I think about when I got the opportunity to cover him as a candidate in New Hampshire, Iowa, places like that. And the thousands, I can never forget it was like a rock star was performing that night, wherever he was coming to. And there was no way McCain or any other candidate could compete with that.
So you think we're going to see that guy this year?
You're going to, piggybacking on your comments, you're going to see that guy 10 times. He is going to show you now the things that he really wants to do. And he's boxing the Republicans in because they going into an election coming up soon, a national election, they simply can't be the party of no. He's going to box Mitch McConnell and Speaker Boehner in because they have troubles, if you will, with their own caucuses. So he does more than just a bully pulpit. He can actually put them into a box.
And do you think, Jeannie, we sit down here 12 months from now that we're going to say this past year in D.C. was dominated by gridlock as usual, it was gridlock on steroids? Or do you say, you know what, even though the Democrats didn't have the House or the Senate, this president got more done than I thought he would? Which do you think it's going to be?
If I'm a guessing person, I would say it's going to be somewhere in between. I don't think we're going to see as much gridlock as we've seen in the past because now Republicans have an incentive to get things done. And their problem is going to be, can they get the president to sign off on what they do? So I do think we're going to see more because I think the president is more likely to go along. We just saw that, you know, a few weeks ago with the budget. You know, he was the one who got together with John Boehner and said, listen, you know, against Nancy Pelosi and others on the left saying, you know, listen, we got to get this through. So I think we will probably see more action. But, you know, I do think that we can't forget that the president is going to face a Congress that is going going to be trying to work with him in some respects and thwart him in others, and you're going to see that old triangulation up again, and it's going to make it very hard for Republicans going into 16 to make the case that they deserve to have the entire government. So this plays well for Democratic
And that
presidential
plays perfectly
candidates.
for a segue, Ellis,
That's
too.
why I did it,
I
Richard,
know
for
that.
you.
You care. And care is not a four-letter word for you, Jade.
You're welcome, Ellis.
Not just a pretty face. So, Ellis, to that end, we're going to at least learn who's going to run this year, okay? So, assuming Hillary's running, start wherever you want, Democrats or Republicans. Does she have a primary challenger? And who, if she does get through the primaries, you all expect, who do you think will be in the field for the Republicans?
Well, the Democrat is easy because I think the answer is not much. I mean, I know that Elizabeth Warren petitions are going around.
Everyone looks at you as soon as you
know,
say the
but,
name. Yeah.
but I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't see it. On the Republican side, the answer is yes, everybody, right? And now that Jeb Bush seems to be inching toward running, maybe Mitt Romney might hold back, but damn near every other national Republican whose name you and I can name is going to be in that race.
You think Christie's running?
I think he's going to try. Yeah.
Christie's running.
Why not?
Right.
What's to lose?
Exactly.
It's not going to be governor of New Jersey forever.
I'm with you, except if you believe at least some of the background on this, some of those same dollars, they don't want to go through what they went through back in 14, where they've got this food fight of a primary of the Republicans. At the end of the day, the smart money or the big money wants to get behind the moderate candidate that can actually win. They seem to be favoring Jeb Bush at the moment. Does a Romney, does a Christie say, you know what, I don't need this in my life, I'll wait for the next cycle? Or do they, as Ellis said, Andrew, do they all get in?
I think everybody gets in. I think Romney may not if he sees the field's too crowded. I think Romney wants an easy path. But everybody's, I mean, Tom Dewey may run. Why not? There's never going to be another opportunity like this. It's a wide open field, especially if Hillary doesn't run on the Democratic side. And flipping back to the Democrats, I think Bernie Sanders is going to run. I think Martin O'Malley is going to run. But if Hillary's in, I think that's pretty much the end of the list. If she's out, all bets are off. Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren,
Any
Andrew
surprising
Cuomo.
names you guys think that'll join the food fight?
None. The way I see it, yeah, you've heard them all. I think that, and I've said this, that Hillary has the nomination. I mean, there is no doubt about it. All the talk, no offense to my esteemed colleague, of Elizabeth Warren, that's ridiculous. I don't care how many people petition her to get on. The Republicans would love for Elizabeth Warren to be the nominee. And on the Republican side, it's either going to be Jeb Bush. He could beat Hillary Clinton. The fact that he speaks Spanish, pulls out his Mexican-American wife, that could play very well. And I'm not ruling out Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney could run on a platform solely of, see, I told you what this guy would do. He did exactly what I said. I'm the businessman. Look at what I did. This time, believe me, I can turn America around.
And will this be the bigger political story next year? We don't even have the election in 15, but will this dominate and suck the air out of all the other political conversations, or are we going to be saying that's for next year? And at 15, we're all going to be fighting over the big policy fights in D.C.
No, this is all we're going to be talking about in 2015. What else to talk about? I mean, the Iowa caucus, we don't even know the exact date yet, but it's going to be sometime very late 15 or very early 16, and this is going to dominate. And unfortunately, it's too late for an unknown to get into this race because of the role money plays in our presidential politics.
It's true, but that's scary, isn't it?
$1.5 billion has to be raised by a candidate on the right or the left to run. Who can do that? We can name them: Mitt Romney, Jeb Bush, Hillary Clinton.
What was that figure again?
One thing to remember, though, I go with you, Dominic, that those big moderate Republicans. History would teach us that in the end, Republicans tend to go with the establishment person who's been waiting in line. But this really could be the year on the Republican side that the Tea Party, real hardcore conservatives, finally get a nominee. And it's not. Don't rule out the Ted Cruz's
But how are they going to get the money to fund them? Because you're dependent on those big-time funders, and they are more moderate.
But Jeannie, the voters in those caucuses and primaries.
Well, I'll give you one name. I'll say this much. I think there's one name we haven't talked about yet. We're going to talk about later in the program. It's a name for me that we should watch here that I think will throw a wrench into this whole thing. There's a tease for you. Okay, head over to Facebook and Twitter to sound off on today's question. What will be the biggest story here that we'll be talking about in 2015? When we come back, a look at some stories, and there's a bunch of them that we think will make headlines in the region this year. Stay tuned. You'll sound smart at the water cooler.